All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1883 Speaker Series. Again, my name is Mike Wozniak. I serve as the Coordinator of Leadership and Programming in the Student Involvement and Parent Programs Office. Each week, we invite a campus or community leader to talk about how today's student can develop their leadership skills, as well as other advice regarding personal and professional development. We hope you learn some valuable lessons in the next 18 minutes and 83 seconds. Today's speaker is an award-winning business communicator and highly intentional leader. Her experience spans both large, publicly traded corporations, as well as small businesses and nonprofits in the private sector. In 2021, she published her first book, Two Generation Guardians, a compilation of short stories depicting the agency's 40-year history and more than 60 of the community's guardians. Please join me in welcoming the President and CEO of the Community Violence Intervention Center, Coiya Tompkins Inman.
Thank you so much, Mike. I think it's really interesting that I'm here today because I got to follow some incredible speakers, incredible leaders. Dr. Link, I think, was up here last week. He somehow made American literature fascinating, and for someone who barely got through it, it was interesting. Dr. Whitney was up here a couple weeks ago in some hiking pants talking about leadership through the eyes of a hiking path. So today, y'all get stuck with an NDSU grad. So they let me in on homecoming week, and nothing bad happened. But I did my best. I've got my und green. This is not bison green, so just don't tell my brothers. But I'm really humbled to be here and to talk to you a little bit about leadership today. So as Mike asked us to get ready for today, he really encouraged us to do a little bit of self-reflection about things that have either impacted us, people who had impacted us, situations. And as I started to reflect a bit, I realized that I've been a bit of a late bloomer for a while. Actually, if I think back to my early days as a 12-year-old, I was raised by a couple of single parents, so we didn't have a ton of money. And as a 12-year-old, I was convinced that I was going to be a gymnast and a cheerleader. And at the age of 12, that's a bit of a late start. For those of you who are familiar with gymnastics and cheerleading, if you're really good, they get you started at about 3 or 4. So I was only about 7 or 8 years late to the party. And through some incredible mentors, I was able to hone that skill pretty late in life, late in my career, and was able to make it to serve as a captain of my cheer team my senior year of college, or senior year of high school. And the reason I tell you that is because I still feel that that skill comes in handy as a leader. I'd like to think I'm continue to be a champion for those that I'm leading. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. But when I think back to my days at that other school, about 20 plus years ago, I was also a late bloomer there. I was studying to be a journalist, and at that time, NDSU was not an accredited, what we called a J school. So I had to make up for that. My friends at the University of Minnesota and Northwestern had these incredible credentials behind their name, and I had to make up for that with a series of internships. So by the time I graduated, I had 6 internships, and I'm going to tell you about one of them in just a second. But even as I reflect today, like Dr. Link, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'll be pushing 50 here in March. But even at this late stage, this is actually my 4th career. And today, as I reflect on the last probably 5 to 7 years of development and executive leadership, I'm a bit of a late bloomer to that party as well. So that'll be the theme for this today. And I'm already screwing up because I can't advance. There we go. So today, I'd like to talk a little bit about what I like to call the late bloomer becomings. I kind of believe that no matter where you are in your leadership career, you can always become better or more or different than you are today. So today, I'm going to talk to you about being curious, being open, being bold, being yourself, and being grateful. There we go. So this is Dr. Martin Luther King. I started studying him about the same age, about the age of 12, became fascinated with what he was able to do. So if you fast forward to one of those internships I had in the late 90s, I was fortunate to have a mentor who knew about curiosity right out of the gate. He needed that skill to be an associate press reporter. I needed that skill to learn how to be a reporter. At that point, I could hardly string a sentence together. But Joe took a chance on me, and he often spent a lot of Saturdays in the office. So even at the ripe young age of the early 20s, I would do whatever I could to find my way to make an excuse to get into Joe's office, particularly on a Saturday, because he could often catch him in a mood to tell a great story. And he was an incredible storyteller, and I wish he was here today because it's been several years since he has passed on now, but I can still smell his Marlboro Red cigarettes. He was not supposed to smoke cigarettes in the newsroom, but he did, and I can almost still smell them. But he tells this story about how he was trying to get an appointment with Dr. King. He was working for the Associated Press in Chicago, so really right in the middle of the action. And he had tried for months to get this appointment. He would try finding out where the public relations professional that we journalists affectionately call the flack, trying to find out where they were having drinks, where they were having a beer, what they were doing. He kept getting turned down. He said I'd call and I'd whine, and he kept telling me no. And finally, all the stars aligned, and very late one afternoon, he didn't even have time to call his wife to say he'd be late for dinner, but he got a call from the flack. And the flack said, if you can be here in 10 minutes, Dr. King will take your appointment. So he races out of there. This is long before iWatches and iPhones and technology. So he raced out of there across town to this old Baptist church. And as Joe talked about it, he said, it's been years since I've talked with Dr. King, but I can still hear the creak in this old stairs as he took the stairs to see Dr. King. He could smell the oak in the pews. And he finally gets the appointment. He sits down and he said, I was so nervous because I had waited all this time for this appointment and I didn't want to screw it up. And about 3 or 4 minutes in the middle of the interview, the phone rings. And back then, for you younger ones, they actually plugged the phone into the wall back then, and it was hooked to a cord. So he kind of ignored it, kept talking, looked a little irritated. Phone rings again. He finally picks up. It's the assistant, and she says, I have a phone call here for Dr. Dill, for Mr. Dill, my mentor, who had taken the appointment. And he said, okay. So he hands the receiver to Joe, and Joe says, yep, eggs, milk, got it. And he hands the receiver back to Dr. King. And at that point, Dr. King had kind of figured out that that was actually Joe's wife calling to remind him to pick up eggs and milk on the way home. So he waits months to get an appointment with Dr. King, and I like to think that it was curiosity that got the appointment, but it was his wife that helped kind of crack the ice for that interview. So it's a great story, and Joe tells it way better than I did, but it was curiosity that got him there. I also think it's important to be open when we think about leadership. One of the things that has occurred to me, this happened pretty early on in my career. I had just been promoted. I had a couple direct reports. I was really excited to be in a leadership position. And I became very aware very quickly that it was no longer just about me. It was about those I was leading. And sometimes you have to be open to things that may not be obvious right up front. So I had a mentor who prided himself on looking for talent in unusual places. So I try to do the same. This is actually one of your own. She's already got a bachelor's degree. This is Shaylee Miller. She's our communication specialist at CVIC. She'll have her master's in a couple of months, walking across the stage here in December. But her master's degree is not really the pedigree that I would look for in a communication specialist. But when she came to work for us last summer, she just had these incredible skills that are really hard to teach. She was highly inquisitive. She challenged me in one of the most respectful ways I had experienced with such a young person fresh out of college. She asked great questions. She asked what books I read. She talked about some concepts she was learning in her program and how they could apply to CVIC. And I just thought she had so much potential. And so when we had an opening open up at CVIC unexpectedly, I asked her to consider coming back full-time. And I'm grateful to tell you that she's full-time with us as of July. And she's doing some incredible things for us as early as this morning, actually. So I think it's really important to be open to things that you might not see immediately and to invest in attitude and talent. and invest in talent and hire for attitude. The other thing that's important, I think, is to be bold, be courageous about what you do. I think it's really fun to talk about being bold. It's hard for me to talk about being bold without talking about Sawyer Anderson. This is her. She was 9 years old when I met her. I had the fortune of talking with her when I was working at Jeremiah Program in Fargo. It's an organization that helps young mothers and their kiddos. And Sawyer had come to us with a donation of what's called a chitange bag. So this is chitange material. It's a very strong, colorful material. You'll see it often in Africa. It's used for a variety of purposes. But Sawyer came to us because after her dad had done a mission trip in Africa, he had told her that there were kiddos her own age that were dying because they didn't have clean water in Africa. Am I still okay? Oh, good. And so they didn't, am I off? You're good? Okay. So she had learned that there were kids her own age that had been dying, and some of them had lost limbs because they didn't have clean water in Africa. So Sawyer decided that she wanted to do something about that. At the young age of 9 years old, she asked her grandmother if she could make some cookies and sell them at her grandmother's rummage sale. And it was really neat. She had the rummage sale, she raised a couple hundred dollars, and it was really inspiring. But for Sawyer, that wasn't enough. She wanted to do more. So she decided to sew these with her dad's help. She got the material and sewed these chitange bags and decided to sell them for $50 each. And she sold them for $50 each because $50 is what will provide clean water for one person for life in Africa. So she starts selling these bags for $50 each, and pretty soon there's more bags than she knows what to do with, which is what led her to Jeremiah Program to donate these bags. And as I'm listening to Sawyer explain kind of what she has done with by this time she's raised several $1,000s, and I just knew I had to work with her in some way. So I had an idea that I ran past her parents over the dinner table one weekday night in the middle of Sawyer was a very busy person at the time, and I suggested to her that it would be really neat if she could inspire others the way she had inspired me by authoring a children's book. And I said, it's probably going to take some time because we might need to find an illustrator to help author this book, but I'd love for it to be in your voice, and I'd love for it to be for kiddos so we could not only educate others, but maybe even raise some additional money for Africa. So the first thing she does with her big blue eyes, and she always had these cute little bows in her hair, she looked across the table and she said, "Are you nuts?" And she shook her head like that. And I said, "Maybe a little bit." And her dad kind of chuckled, and he said, "Run to your room and grab your sketchbook." I did not know that she was an artist. So she comes back to the table, and she's got these amazing illustrations. So that idea led to Sawyer creating a children's book that I have with me today that is authored by her and now illustrated by her. It's also been translated in another language, but it's called Waterworks. And with a partnership she has created with Wellspring for the World as well as World Vision, Sawyer has now raised over $1 million for water wells in Africa. She has supported 25,000 lives and created 75 wells. So if you think, this is not a late bloomer, but she's certainly inspired this one. And if you think you can't do anything, I think it just goes to prove that you can do anything at any age if you stay bold about it. She actually was just honored with a national award for her work. I also think it's important to be yourself. I had some opportunities when I was in corporate America where I was in different work environments where it wasn't necessarily the best fit for my style and for what was kind of fueling my soul. And I'm grateful to tell you that about 10 years ago, I stepped away from that now, and I'm in my dream job now at CVIC, and I have found a work home that really matches my values, and I believe it's a good fit I'm investing in activities that really fuel my soul and keep me moving, and I get to work with people like Laura. So this was Laura and I after signing a couple of bills that Laura actually helped author. She was part of a team that we worked with throughout the state to work on some legislation. This particular bill actually helps add stalking to domestic violence protection orders, which is an incredible gift not only to our clients, but the families that are impacted by it. And Laura helped author this bill with help from Representative Zach Issa. And it was just a really fun day. I got to spend 4 hours with one of my favorite people. She has been with CVIC for almost 30 years. She spent almost her entire career with us. But I think it's important as you enter into leadership that you align yourself with people who feel your soul and help you do things in your job that align with your values. And you get to work with people like Laura, which is extra special. And lastly, I think it's really important that you stay grateful about things. I've been very fortunate to have so many mentors throughout my career. And I really do try very hard. Both of my parents instilled this in me to send handwritten thank you notes. I know with the way technology is moving that text messages are often a nice way to do a quick send out, but a handwritten thank you note is gonna really surprise someone and go a long way in hoping to show the gratitude that you have received for something that you have been done, that's been done for you. I think it's important too that you remember people who remembered you when maybe you didn't know everything. Maybe you were a little green. Like me, I was having trouble stringing a sentence together. And lastly, I think it's really important to pay it forward for those that have done right by you. It was really ironic because I was preparing this morning and I got a text message from someone I had worked with about 7 years ago. I had forgotten what she had referred to. She said, I don't know if you remember, but you had helped me do this thing and it really went a long way. And I hadn't even remembered that I had done that. But I'm gonna keep that text message, and I've already screenshotted it. So that gratitude and paying it forward really goes a long way. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Coiya.
Now it's working.
Now it works. Awesome. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming. Join us here next week for the Executive Director of Northlands Rescue Mission, Sue Sherrick. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your homecoming week.